What's up, y'all? Happy Monday. Welcome into another edition of DNVR Rams Live, presented by our friends at Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com, use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. I'm Justin Michael. You may know me as J-Mike. We've got a lot to dive into today. It was a busy sports weekend in the Denver sports world. I'm running on fumes at this point, trying to keep up with everything. The Broncos are fun. The Avs and Nuggets are fun. CSU men's basketball is fun, and the future looks very bright for CSU football. We're going to get into kind of a lot of that different stuff today. If you're rocking live with us on YouTube and you wouldn't mind giving us a thumbs up, I certainly would appreciate it. Say what's up in the Toyota chat. Keep the questions, comments, etc. rolling. If I don't get to them right away, we can always start it and come back at the end of the show. I'm going to try and keep things on schedule as best as possible because this is such a random show. We're going to talk about the future of Pac-12 and kind of how it really feels wide open. You know, I think some of the established brands, if you will, some of the, Boise States and Oregon States who you would traditionally assume would be the programs that would kind of carry the banner in this league and still probably are the favorites to do so, are in a state of flux themselves. And I think that's really exciting if you are a school like CSU, like San Diego State, even Fresno State and Texas State to an extent. We'll get into all that. I'll power rank the Pac-12 coaches going into the new season, kind of based on how I view the rankings. And I'm sure I'll stir some Boise fans up with where I have Spencer Danielson, despite the fact that he's won 3 straight league titles. But we'll get into all of that. I'm going to get into some non-conference takeaways for CSU men's basketball. Took care of business as you would have hoped for in these last couple of non-con games. Dartmouth, New Mexico, Northern New Mexico, and NAIA program. You would expect the Rams to roll. They more or less did. So we'll get into all of that. I wanted to start just briefly with a couple of thoughts on the Heisman winner, Fernando Mendoza, who I love. I'm all in on that kid. He is as genuine as they come. I loved his acceptance speech. It was admittedly corny. He is kind of a cornball, gives off Kirk Cousins vibes, but I think he's his authentic self. I think he's very genuine. I think he's a tremendous teammate. I think his story is so cool. I mean, he had one FBS offer coming out of high school, goes to Cal, makes a name for himself, and to do what he's done at Indiana, nobody saw this coming. And to just see the way he's carried himself through all of this, it's pretty old school. And to be honest, it's kind of the exact opposite of what we've seen out of Diego Pavia, who very much should be in a similar vein as Mendoza when it comes to being loved and appreciated for his rise. Both of these guys had to fight and claw for all of their success. Both of them, didn't have a lot of love coming out of high school. These aren't 5-star guys. Pavia starts at New Mexico State a couple of years ago, and then he elevates Vanderbilt. So to see both of these Heisman finalists be at non-traditional football powerhouses, I think that's pretty cool. And I think that is one of the benefits of NIL is kind of the parity. We've seen some programs that haven't, traditionally been great kind of factor into the conversation these last couple of years. And I think that's really cool. Now, I personally lean more on the Mendoza mentality than the Pavia, look at me, pound my chest. After he loses, he goes on Instagram and says, F all the voters, kind of classless, in my opinion. Kind of an example of someone who's maybe leaned into his ego a little too much over the last year. Again, like I just think Mendoza is kind of the old school football approach. It's all about the team, believe in yourself, believe in your brothers. And it's just cool to see a kid like that get rewarded, in my opinion. And seeing everything he's doing off the field, helping families impacted by MS, taking them on like a $40,000 shopping spree. Like that's what college athletics are supposed to be about. And that's using your platform to help others. And you just love to see that kind of stuff. That is great. As we see in the Toyota chat here, some tough portal news for CSU football this morning. I don't even have it in the rundown because I wasn't anticipating having to talk about that, but I guess we should go there. A couple of starters in the trenches hitting the portal: Christian Martin and Tanner Morley. That's a blow. Javian Kennard has also posted about entering the portal. Not really a shocker. If we're being realistic, Morley, I had higher hopes of being able to hang on to, just given that he was a Colorado kid, but I talked about that when I did my list. You can't just assume that because someone's a Colorado kid, they're going to stick around. We saw it last year with Kershke. The portal is the portal. We know what this process is. I will say, while losing a couple of these guys all on the same day is a tough blow, it wasn't unexpected. When you have a coaching change, this is always going to be a part of the deal. Even when you don't have a coaching change these days, you're going to have significant roster turnover. It is what it is. I'm not going to cry over spilled milk. I'm not going to act shocked. I am a little surprised Morley entered the portal. I'm not surprised some of these other guys did, though, because that's just what college football is today. And while today it stings, it's a tough blow, I'll just encourage everyone to remember basically every winter, this is how it goes. You learn about the departures first. The sky is falling. Burn it all down. It's all over. We lost him. We're never going to be able to replace him. 10 to 14 days later, you start adding guys. We're so back, baby. God, are we back? We're going to win it all. It's the same ordeal every single winter. This just is what college football is today. We'll see what the roster looks like, in about a month from now, and then we'll kind of start to assess what the expectation should be going into year one. But I just would urge everyone to not panic as far as NIL support goes. CSU is going to be in a good position, at least to its peers. But it's a bummer. It's a bummer, to lose a kid like Morley who didn't have a ton of interest, coming out of high school. You bring him in, you develop him, but you can't fault him in the slightest. They fired his coach. And based on the way things are trending, it doesn't really look like much of the offensive staff, if any, are going to be retained. He has every right to, pursue other pastures, as do all these players. As much as I kind of hate what the current status quo is, as much as I have gripes with the state of college football not being an appealing product for a lot of fan bases across the country, and it being borderline impossible to sustain over the extended stretches that we used to see, because roster retention and development was such an integral part to all of that. This is what college football is today. So I think we got to try and embrace it, kind of like Mora did, and hope that a guy who has been evaluating talent for a very long time is able to, get enough pieces together in year one to at least make this things interesting. And, hopefully by year two at the latest, you are competing for championships. That said, Mora's gone on the record multiple times now and said that the goal in year one is to win a Pac-12 title. So we'll see. Holding on to some guys would be a big part of that. I hate losing Chop Kennard. He's dynamic in the return game. He's explosive. He's a versatile weapon. I will say, while there are no guarantees, I feel like you are adding a similar profile player in Cedric Ross in this most recent signing class, and it wouldn't surprise me if, like Kennard, you find ways to get that guy on the field early just because he is electric. He is a guy who can be kind of a slot receiver, running back. You could line him up out wide. He's going to bring some ability in the return game as well. So, it stings to lose guys. I'm more of it hurts to lose guys in the trenches than the skill players, but I'm also not sure like where Christian Martin would have factored into the equation next year. Morley would have been an anticipated starter, no doubt, assuming that he was healthy and ready to go. Happy trails to those guys. Best of luck to them. It is what it is. Given the coaching change, you knew that this would be part of the process. Let's see how this shakes out over the next month before we hit the panic button. I guess that's what I would say. Congrats to Owen Long. He was named a third-team All-American by the AP. first CSU defender to get All-American recognition from the AP since Greg Myers back in 95, so 30 years. That's significant. He led the FBS in total tackles with 151 this season. That is the 7th most by any individual in CSU football history, certainly the most by anybody in modern times. The other defenders in program history to receive AP recognition, Mike Bell in 77 and 78, and he's an interesting example of does morality and off the field behavior, should it influence whether you are celebrated by the school or not? Jeff Harper in 78, linebacker, received honorable mention, All-American nod, was an honorable mention All-American, however you say that. Trey McBride remains the only consensus All-American in school history. He continues to do monster things in the NFL. He now has 105 catches this year in just 14 games. That's freaking crazy for a tight end. First NFL tight end in history to record back-to-back 100-catch seasons. And again, it's only week 14. I mean, he legitimately has a chance to put up like 125-plus catches, depending on how much they throw the ball late here. Up to 10 receiving touchdowns on the year, which is awesome to see. That's more than he had in his first 3 years combined, more than he had in his first 3 years, plus his time at CSU, probably close to at least. He is legitimately on a Hall of Fame trajectory. That is not hyperbole. He's got a lot more to accomplish to actually achieve that. But I talked about it when he was drafted. It takes a couple of years for tight ends to really hit their prime because of the physical gap that you experience kind of going from the collegiate ranks to the NFL. It's just a whole new ball game in terms of the caliber of defender that you're dealing with, the caliber of athlete that you're going up against. And it takes these tight ends a couple of years to adjust. You saw it with Kelsey, you saw it with Kittle, you see it with all these guys. And McBride certainly popped in his first couple of seasons. He flashed that potential. We knew he was somebody who would translate right away. He's just now entering his prime, though. And if he keeps this up, for, and health is always going to be a big part of this conversation. But if he keeps this up, for another 5+ years, is able to have one of those stretches where he's very clearly the established best player at his position in the NFL. I mean, he really could be in the Hall of Fame someday, which is really cool to see, because a lot like we've said about, Isaiah Stevens, like Neat Clifford, like so many of the stars that have come through Fort Collins in the last, 5-ish years or so, just a genuinely great person. Could not be representing CSU better. It's been really quite special to see what Trey's been able to do, a small town kid, from Fort Morgan, who frankly should have had a lot more P4 interest coming out of high school than he did. Like, his all-around athleticism was extremely evident. Just go look at how he dominated everything that he did. Was a great baseball player. He hooped. I mean, he was a beast. He was Mr. Do-It-All, and it's just been cool to see, especially considering his loyalty to CSU through it all, despite not being part of a very successful stretch. As much as I absolutely hate the Steve Adazio era and more or less would like to forget it even happened in the first place, I am thankful that they got that 2020 border war win, because if I looked back and neither of the McBrides had a single rivalry win to their name, it just would be tough to stomach. So I guess that's the one silver lining in what was otherwise one of the more embarrassing stretches in program history. And the weird thing is if you would have told me, coming out of the Adazio era, early Norvell era, the fact that we'd be back in this same position, less than a half decade later, still hoping that a new coach would come in and be able to revive things, I would shake my head. Feels like the last 10 years have been such a missed window after, finally getting the school to invest in athletics in a major way, getting the on-campus stadium. You've had student commitment, which was such an issue when I was a student, for sure. I mean, you'd have good teams that couldn't draw the crowds that the 2-10 team was able to get this season. But I do feel like the future is bright for CSU, and I'm very excited, going into this Pac-12 era, even if the last couple of years have felt like a letdown and a missed opportunity in a time where the Mountain West wasn't exactly dominant. I'll give a couple of thoughts on that here coming up. Again, if you're rocking live with us on YouTube, hit thumbs up, say what's up in the Toyota chat, keep your questions, comments rolling. Love to see all you guys on a Monday morning. Let's take a quick break real quick. Let's shout out a couple of our partners, and then we'll get into it. I want to talk to you guys about Toyota. Trucks have always been a part of Toyota's DNA for generations. Toyota's built durable legends destined for greatness and perfect for Colorado. Whether you are conquering off-road trails, whether you are hauling the weight of the world, there's a Toyota truck that's just right for you. Check out the 2025 Tacoma or the Land Cruiser. They've got 17 models with available all-wheel drive, four-wheel drive like the Epic 4Runner. Toyota also offers more low and zero emission vehicles combined than any other automaker to give customers numerous choices to reduce their carbon footprint. 16 hybrid vehicles to choose from, like the Tundra iForce Max hybrid truck. Toyota SUVs take command on the road and on the trail. It's what makes them perfect for Colorado. You can take them up in the mountains. You can go on a trip to the Western Slope. You can go, east on I-70 and go explore all Kansas has to offer. Or, you can cruise around the suburbs in the city. It's perfect. Toyota is a proud partner of CSU Athletics. They're the official vehicle of DNVR. Toyota, let's go places. With the holiday season coming up, I also want to talk to you guys about Aura frames. They are the perfect answer for any of your holiday gift giving dilemmas. Maybe you need to find something for a friend. Maybe you need to get something for mom still. The Aura frame is the perfect gift. It's the perfect amount of shiny new gadget, but heart sentimental. It doesn't feel like you're just wowing them with flash. You're given something that comes from the heart and gives you an opportunity to day after day experience all of your favorite memories. I've got one in my kitchen. It's really cool. I just sit there cooking dinner. Oops, some pics of the pup. Oh, there's my engagement photos. It's one of those that really is neat. It's super easy to use. You upload the photo and video via the app. Boom, unlimited memory. For a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off Aura's best-selling Carver Mat frames, named number 1 by Wirecutter. I use that promo code DNVR at checkout. That's auraframes.com with the promo code DNVR. This deal is exclusive to listeners and say, oh my goodness, getting tongue-tied. Frames sell out fast, so order yours now in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions do apply. Shout out to Aura frames. They really are cool. I've got one in the kitchen every time I take a new photo. Want to upload it immediately. Great gift and a great partner of the show. All right, before we get into some of the Pac-12 stuff, before we talk hoops, big game against Utah State coming up on Saturday, as we're seeing in the Toyota chat. Really looking forward to that one. Banger of a matchup to kick off conference play for the Rams. Tough game going to Logan, though. I kind of wanted to first give an update. James Finley, the wide receivers coach of the last couple of years, has been hired by Oregon State. I had seen that he had posted about his daughter being accepted there recently, so I kind of, you put two and two together. Not really surprising. Wish him well. Good dude. Really respected recruiter on the West Coast. There's a lot of good receivers coaches out there. I saw some people being like, this is devastating. I want to be respectful to him. Again, I think he's a really good recruiter. I'm not trying to put him down as an on-field coach or anything like that. I will say the last couple of years, and this extends to, when Savage was the wide receivers coach as well, there hasn't been a ton of development. And I don't know if it's fair to say that's on the position coaches or if it's just on a lack of depth for the group or what. But I do think that we need to see that wide receiver group be more impactful in the future, regardless of who's coaching. But certainly wish James Finley well. Good dude. Enjoyed the couple interactions I had with him over the years. And again, I think he's a phenomenal recruiter. We'll be interested to see what type of success he has at Oregon State. Aaron saying scale of 1 to 10. How excited is Justin to see the blue gloves in the student section on Saturday? Utah State has some of the oddest fans in the country. They've got these weird song they sing and the dance and blue gloves. It's if you've never been to the Mountain West tournament, I highly recommend you go this spring. It's going to be the last one for CSU, obviously, but it is hilarious to experience kind of the variance in school cultures. Like San Diego State fans are really rowdy. Utah State fans are honestly very rowdy and active. It's just an odd bunch. Getting back on track, though, I know we've been all over the place here. It feels like these last couple of years have been a missed opportunity, and that's kind of why I am excited to turn the page here. Watching Boise in the bowl game against Washington, I just kept thinking about how these last couple of years were such a missed opportunity in the sense that the league wasn't even any good. Like, I know Boise went to the playoff in 2024 and Genty was incredible, but this isn't the Boise that we saw in 2011. And I've talked so much about how the gap isn't what it used to be. And that's not just an overreaction to a weird bowl game where they got dummied by Washington, but just imagine how CSU fans would have felt if, after the showing we saw by the Rams in Seattle in week 1 against Washington, we told you that Washington team's going to go on to throttle Boise in the postseason. We'd be like, man, the Rams must be a pretty good team if they could hang against that Washington team. But I mean, between last year avoiding Boise and UNLV on the schedule, and then this year just the league not being very good, and you having one of the more experienced staffs and rosters on paper coming into the year, the fact that CSU went 2-10 and we're in a rebuild stage is objectively crazy. And I'm really excited for the new Pac-12. I don't know if they've had the PR wins over the last year that we would have hoped for, just from a completing the league standpoint. Even the media deal stuff is in a weird spot. I think they did a good thing. I think exposure was really important. I am very curious to see if we ever find out what those numbers look like. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. But just a weird time to be in transition. We'll get into that. I did want to talk a little bit of hoops because we haven't had an opportunity really over the last week and a half to go deep into hoops with everything that's happened on the football side of things. We had to talk about signing day. We had to talk about what we had learned from Jim Mora, and that's going to continue to be important over the next couple of weeks here. But I did want to hit on this team because I think they're in a really good spot going into the conference portion of the schedule. I was not able to be at this game on Sunday. I was in Denver for the Broncos game. Got a lot of media responsibilities these days between the newsletter and everything I'm doing on the Avs side of things, but was able to catch up on that game after the fact. I do want to start by saying I have a lot of respect for what CSU did on Sunday to raise awareness for neurodivergent individuals. And I think it's really special that the Farouk Manesh family is using their platform to, raise awareness and be a positive impact in our community. And it's not, you hear so much at these intro pressers when a coach comes in about how they are going to be a part of the community. It's another to back it up. And the Farouk Manesh are very much a part of Fort Collins, and Ali is a good coach. I mean, I certainly believe in what he can do from a basketball perspective, but how he represents this program with class and the type of person he is makes me far more proud that he represents the school that I graduated from and have, supported my entire life, even more so than the success that I anticipate he will have as a head coach. And again, I really do think he is going to achieve quite a bit at CSU. I'm excited to see it play out. But the Rams 9-2 now on the year, exactly where you would have anticipated. That's what I said in the non-conference. Again, it didn't go exactly how I projected. I thought that Loyola would be better. I thought that'd be a tougher matchup. Certainly didn't think they would lose to DU, but winning a big game against CU at home, coming up with a couple of top 100 wins in the MTE, and ultimately, mostly taking care of business at home. That's exactly where you would have expected CSU to be. Close the non-conference stretch with a 5-game winning streak. They don't have an easy stretch coming up, so it's good that they have been able to generate some positive momentum here and stack some wins coming off of back-to-back gut-punching losses. I mean, this really could have gone a different direction with a team who had so many new pieces. You start the year hot, the offense looks great, then you lose a gut-wrencher against DU where you have a shot to win, but you come up short. Then you battle like hell, come up short against, Va Tech, and again have a shot to win, but come up short. there's a world where that team spirals and they go 1-2 in the MTE. They come back home, get bullied by a really athletic CU team, and you're basically, sitting here at like 6-5 or something. I mean, that really could have happened given how many new pieces you had and some of the injuries you've had to deal with. No Bemba again on Sunday, no Jorgensen in this one, although I think that's not going to be a serious ordeal. This team has showed some real resilience, and I think that's encouraging. I think that's a testament to the character of the guys on the roster, but I think it's also a representation of the quality coaching that you have here within this program. And I'm really excited to see where this team can go in the league slate, because a lot like we said about football, it's felt wide open this year. I do think that the league is trending more in the right direction after kind of a disastrous November. Basically everybody in the conference who you had any type of expectations for had some type of landmine loss. Boise kind of lucky that their D2 loss doesn't impact them from a metric standpoint, but it still impacts your perception regardless. Utah State is really the team, I guess, that's kind of avoided it. South Florida is not a bad loss. It wasn't a good loss for them, but it's not devastating by any means. But December has been a lot more encouraging kind of across the board. You've picked off some nice non-con wins. Boise got St. Mary's, I think, for the third straight year. We've seen some teams compete and trend in the right direction, CSU being one of them. Dartmouth and Northern New Mexico, are teams that you should bully, so I'm not going to get too carried away here as far as, putting a ton of stock into this. But I do think that there have been some encouraging elements to come out of this, and one of those is most certainly getting an extended look at some guys who had not played a ton of minutes early in the season. I like that they are getting Darnez Slater on the floor a little bit more. We always knew it was going to be a challenge ironing out this rotation because you have a lot of inexperience, a lot of first and second year players. You have a lot of transfers that you're leaning on in the first year in the system. You knew it was going to be kind of a feel it out process. You also know that with the amount of guys you have that are capable, there was kind of going to be a let's try this, then let's try this, let's try this, and evaluate it after, we have a decent enough sample size. And I think that's kind of been the beauty of this non-conference schedule. As I don't want to say it was unappealing, because I think you got a nice balance of quality opponent and winnable games. But I think that is the nice thing about how you had some games here at the end that weren't really going to be super high stress so long as nothing fluky happened, is it gives you an opportunity to tinker with some stuff. And offensively, this team knows what their identity is. They're a great 3-point shooting team. They share the basketball well. I think they're number one in Ken Palm effective field goal percentage right now, which makes a ton of sense because all they do is shoot threes and get to the rim, which is an analytical dream. But they know who they are. The question is, can they elevate defensively? And I think guys like Darnez Slater give you a greater opportunity of doing that than, like Rex Steiner defensively. The trouble is a lot of these guys, because they're young and unproven and still being developed, are not finished products, and they all have different strengths. They all have different weaknesses. And can you kind of figure out the equation that allows you to bring the best out of all of these different pieces? Can you get just enough time on the floor to take advantage of Brandon Recksteiner shooting? Because you can't take him out of the equation. He's one of the best 3-point shooters in the country this year. You don't want less of Pasquarelli, obviously, but this team does need to be better defensively than what we've seen, and we'll get into that when we dive into some of the numbers. But if the Rams are going to be a team that wants to compete for a conference championship, and I think that they should be considered one of the top 2 or 3 contenders in the league going into the conference slate, that's going to be a big factor for them. And again, I think it was encouraging that you were able to get some run here for some of these other guys as we get closer to the league slate. If you want to be a title team, you got to play defense. We'll get into that. Let me take a quick break real quick. I was trying to drag it out so that we could get the transition right. There's always stuff going on behind the scenes, folks. Live TV, it's big business, big things happening. Let's take a quick break. Let's shout out our partners, and then we'll keep the combo rolling. I want to talk to you about branded bills. You know, maybe somebody in your life needs a new CSU hat with their on-campus collection. You can hook them up. I've got a couple on the set here. I've got 3 different branded Bills hats that I rock in my rotation all the time. All of them a little bit different. I like that. I like that they've got varying styles. If you want kind of the trucker style with the mesh back and more of a solid frame, they've got that. They've got the softer, more, you know, moisture wicking golf style hat that people love these days with the rope front as well. They've got dad hats, they've got flat bills, they've got it all. Branded bills, you know, whether you're looking for snapbacks, truckers, fitteds, beanies, or tees, they've got you covered. If you want gear to make your brand stand apart, look no further than Branded Bills. They've got the best custom headwear. We made DNVR and ALLCITY hats through them. Start your order. Their dedicated team will help you get the exact custom apparel you need. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. I also want to talk to you guys about Dick's Sporting Goods. Obviously, the holidays are coming up. It can be stressful. I got a significant portion of my family's gifts with Dick's Sporting Goods. I did it at dicks.com, where it's super easy to get everything that you need. Free shipping on a lot of orders, depending on how much you get. What's awesome about Dick's Sporting Goods, they've got the hottest apparel in town. They've got the best footwear. They've got Nike. They've got Adidas Originals. They've got Hoka. If you need it, they've got it. They've got all the gear, whether it be baseball, basketball, hockey, golf. They've got tailgating essentials. They've got camping stuff. You know, maybe you just need to pick up a cooler or a tent or something like that. Dick's is the one-stop shop for it all. I don't know if you knew this, but right now is the 12 Days of Giftmas event. You can find the link in our bio. You have an opportunity to enter and win $100 in prizes. You're going to get $50 to Dick's, $50 to the ALLCITY merch store. Check that out. Again, link in the bio. Get your gear fast and free curbside pickup at your nearest store or easy shipping from dicks.com, because every season starts at Dick's. All right, let's talk about this Northern New Mexico game. Let's get into the numbers a little bit. Again, kind of had to play catch up because I was at the Broncos game initially, but I think you did exactly what you would have hoped for. You're able to top the 100-point mark. Got another preseason prediction right. Missed on a couple as well. We're not gonna act like I hit them all, but I think realistically this team is where you would have anticipated based on the context coming in of having a first-year coach and the amount of production that you had to replace from last year's squad. I think we've seen a lot of the new pieces really come into their own, and I think we've seen some guys who have been around and maybe aren't exactly in the role they would have anticipated or hoped to deal with that adversity well. And Darnaz Slater is one of those guys who I want to specifically shout out because, you know, he was on the team last year. He's put in the work behind the scenes. He's highly impactful in practice. He does all the right stuff. He's an intriguing player. One of the tough things of having this many capable players is finding that balance of how do I use all these guys? Because you can't. It's not a video game. You know, you can't throw 13 guys out or you're not really going to allow anybody to get into a rhythm. And that's one of the great challenges of coaching is how do you get people to buy in when you have all these people who feel like they are capable of playing a bigger role and are, you know, they have the ability, but just for whatever reason, you know, maybe it's we have somebody who does something else better, or we've just got so much depth at the position, whatever it may be. It's tough to stay focused. To see Darnaz Slater after, you know, really more or less not playing a ton. I know he got some run against Dartmouth as well, but for not playing for an extended period, you know, in those big games against CU or in the MTE, to come out and score 17 points, go 6 of 6 from the floor. Shout out to him, man. Like, way to take advantage of your opportunity. I've talked a lot about how I feel like he's more of a natural facilitator than Rex Steiner. Brandon is an important piece of all of this for CSU. Don't get me wrong. He's a flamethrower from 3-point range. He's a hooper. He's a guy who can create his own shot more so than a lot of the other guys on the floor. You need what he brings to the table for this team to be where they need to be. but he's not like a pure facilitator, and that's why we've seen them try to get JoJo on the floor more. That's why they've seen, Jevin Mooney's, kind of assume part of that role as well. He's more of a wing, but a lot like Neek last year, he does initiate a lot of stuff for you offensively, and he is a very capable facilitator, probably the best of the established, players to this point. But there is a lot of minutes on the table still for some of these other guys if they go out and take them. And I think Jace Butler has probably done the best job of the young guys of really taking a stranglehold of his role on this team. He's not a starter for the Rams at the moment. He could be, though. But he is, in my opinion, if not the best, one of the best six men in the entire conference. What he brings to the table as an on-ball defender is very much needed. Pure scorer, great shooter, gets rebounds, makes good passes, just kind of does the right things at the right time. I've loved what we've seen from him. I think we've seen some peaks and valleys from JoJo, which is to be expected given his inexperience. But I came into the year hoping to see, Slater and McConan, kind of figured it wouldn't be both just based on the amount of transfers you brought in, find a way to carve out a role on this team, because I think that they are intriguing. Both are good athletes. McConan, you see it on that breakaway dunk, but I think even more than that, you would credit him for the boards that he pulled down. How many did he have? He had 7 rebounds in 16 minutes on the floor. That's how you earn more playing time. The highlight dunk was sick. Don't get me wrong. Loved it. It's fun. You're winning by a million. Why not? But the effort on the glass, being able to disrupt things defensively, that's how you're going to be able to carve out more minutes in this rotation, because they've got guys who can score. They need more rebounding. They need more on-ball defense. And I think all of these young guys have that in their wheelhouse. It's just who can do it with the most consistency. You have to earn it in practice. And then when you do get those opportunities in a game like this, you've really got to seize the moment. And I think to the credit of all of them, Slater, McConan, even Joppa. I mean, Joppa had 12 points in 14 minutes, 5 of 5 from the floor. Now, you wouldn't expect that Northern New Mexico is going to be able to handle his size or physicality in the paint. But again, like you can only play the cards that you are dealt. You can only take advantage of the situations that you are in. And all of those guys in a situation where you were hoping to not have it be a high stress game, and to the credit of the starters and your more standard rotation, they were able to establish that early lead with a 60-26, first half. I thought it was really exciting that these other guys were kind of able to show what they bring to the table. And again, I think that's a testament to the makeup of this roster and the kind of guys that they are. But I think it also is just a product of what this program is, which is they bring in highly skilled players and they develop them. For all the lack of development we've seen on the football side in recent years, very few players have come through the CSU basketball program and have left not having seen their game significantly elevated. I mean, look at the payday that Crocker Johnson and Cayenne were able to get out of it. And you got to credit the staff because they're able to identify the right type of fits and the right type of athlete who's going to translate. And credit them for their flexibility and being able to then, adjust when you lose some of those pieces. Again, we can cry over spilled milk. We can point out all of the flaws with the portal, and it is a flawed process, but good coaches figure it out. And I think this staff in their first year have really shown well, all things considered. And I've been impressed with the roster. I'm interested to see what happens with this rotation in the early portion of the conference slate. Like, is it going to be, really like a 50-50 split? Are we going to kind of see across the board everybody in the low 20s, or is it more like what we saw on the MT where some of those guys are playing 30 plus and it's more of a pick and choose situation for some of those extended members of the rotation? We shall see, but you have to credit them for what they did in this instance, because if you come out and you look dumb, you jack up a bunch of bad shots where you're not playing defense, you're not making an impact on the glass, well, then the coach is going to trust his instincts. He's not going to give you another opportunity. So I wanted to credit those guys because we haven't really talked a lot about them on the show this year. Obviously it's been a big emphasis on Jorgensen and Pasquarelli and Kerry Booth and his evolution. And all those guys have been really fun stories, but this is a deep team. And I think it's cool to see these guys seize the moment when their number is called. As far as just some general team takeaways, we've really alluded to all of them, so I don't want to spend too much time on this, but they understand their offensive identity. I'd like to see them attack the hoop with a little more consistency. And again, I think that's another area where someone like Slater or McConan, if he gets any run, could maybe make an impact for you. Slater more of a slasher. He'll shoot the ball too, but he's not on the Rex Steiner, Kyan Evans, Pasquarelli side of things. There's toughness to this team that's legitimate. I've been encouraged by that. They punch back. They don't hang their heads. Don't let a couple of bad turnovers completely take them out of the game. Defense still has room for growth. I think they're ninth in opponent field goal percentage in the conference right now. That's an area they've got to be better. I'd like to see them create more offensive rebounds, but their rebounding is hard to judge because I think they're fourth in margin. They're plus 79, which is fine. They make so many shots that you're not going to have a ton of opportunity for offensive rebounds. Their rebounds are really weird to assess. They're 11th in offensive rebounds per game, but they give up the least amount of total rebounds per game, I believe, despite being 11th in total boards themselves. Like, all of those numbers isolated could give you the wrong conclusion. They're not a bad rebounding team, but I do think creating more second chance opportunities would be an area that would really help the Rams, especially, on some nights where maybe the threes aren't falling with the type of consistency that they have for much of the year. They're 11th in turnover margin, so I'd like to see them create more on the defensive side. They don't have a ton of giveaways offensively, but they do not create a ton of turnovers themselves. It's another area you could see them grow. Just the defense in general needs to continue to go up another level or even two if they're going to be legitimate contenders. But many of these guys are not completed projects yet. And I think that's what is ultimately the most exciting and what gives me the most hope going into the league slate is I think there's a world where like Rex Steiner and Butler, really make a leap. Like, I think Pasquarelli is probably the closest to being who he is, but we've already seen Jorgensen grow a ton. I think he's going to continue to grow. If Bemba can ever get on the floor with any consistency, I think he is an important piece of all of this. But they've got a lot of young guys who you came in with high hopes and knew that theoretically they could be something. The potential was there. The ceiling was theoretically high. I think a lot of these guys have elevated their floors substantially while still having, quite a bit of room to grow in the future. And that's what really excites me, is that I know that under Ali and Shelton and these guys who we have a decent sample size to this point, they're going to elevate those guys because they're good coaches. It's what they do. We've seen it consistently now for multiple years. And I would be pretty shocked if, come late February, going into March, if the Rams aren't right there in the mix with Utah State. San Diego State's still going to, make noise in the league. I know it hasn't been the hot start we anticipated. I think Boise's recovered well. Utah State looked great, but the Rams are in a good spot. Okay. Let's take one more break here. Let's shout out a couple of these guys, and let's get into all the Pac-12 stuff. I feel like I teased that a ton at the beginning and then didn't exactly get right into it. But yeah, let me shout out those partners real quick. I want to talk to you about Game Time. There's never been a better time to be a Denver sports fan than right now. Late 90s are pretty tough to beat. I get that. You win 4 combined titles, but with the Nuggets, the Avs, the Broncos all being legitimate threats, the Rams look like a team that could be an NCAA tournament team. It's fun. There's a lot of fun stuff going on. And if you want to go to those things in person, Game Time is the way to do it. Whether you're an Avs fan, or whether you're looking for Broncos tickets, and you're going to need a deal if you're trying to get Broncos tickets these next couple of weeks, because the price is going up for sure. What's great about Game Time is it's just so easy to use. You know that the price you see is the price you'll pay. You're going to get 100% authentic tickets on time and at the best price. Right now, I saw there were like Nuggets Rockets tickets tonight for like $26. It's a great deal. Take the guesswork out of buying NHL, NFL tickets, whatever, with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use that code DNVR for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, create an account, redeem that code DNVR for $20 off. Tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today. I also would like to talk to you about Coors Light. Life occasionally is going to get you worked up. You know it. I know it. I've joked about it a lot, but the holidays, the older you get, are more stressful than magic. I'm still a sap for Christmas, don't get me wrong. But between having to go out and get everybody gifts, in between work and everything else, and trying to appease 8 million people and be 8 million places at once, it's tiring. And there are going to be moments these next couple of weeks where I need some me time. I got to go out. I got to take some deep breaths, maybe walk the dog, just get a second to be just. And then when I'm chilling, when I'm kicked back, enjoying the company of loved ones, maybe crack open an ice cold Coors Light. When the mountains turn blue, it is as cold as the Rockies. It's cold lagered, it's cold packaged, it's cold filtered for that smooth finish that you know. Make the most out of the times you choose to chill. Choose Coors Light. Get Coors Light delivered straight to your door. Visit CoorsLight.com/DNVR. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. Beer. Got a comment in the Twitter chat. Can you apply the Aura frame to your Grundle, though? Inquiring minds need to know. I mean, I think you could technically put whatever you want on your Aura frame. How others are going to react to that, well, that's probably situational. I would imagine. My guy Aaron Harris says Taco Bell Cantina at about 11:45. If you know, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. There's something about the Cantina in Vegas that's calling my name. It's calling my name. I hope the Pac-12 tournament's in Vegas. That's kind of a good way to segue all of this. Maybe let's talk about this Pac-12 2.0, because while I don't think it's been the smashing home run that we would have hoped for, I wanted Memphis, and I think failing to add Memphis was a hitch in this whole plan. I think the Pac-12 schools assumed that they would be more willing to jump and align with essentially the best of the rest. You can throw out a couple of other schools who could be in that conversation out of the American as well. But Memphis was kind of the big prize that the Pac-12, at least to this point, has failed to land. And that's made some people feel like, man, was this really the win that it was sold to be? And for me, I think there's a lot of semantics that get argued that are basically a waste of time. I think basically every school that's remaining in the group of six, if you want to call it that, has been left behind. You're going to hear so many bold things from UConn football fans. UNLV and New Mexico are the big ones in the Mountain West of late that think they're the next to hear their name called. Memphis, South Florida, all of them, they all think they're next. CSU and Boise and the San Diego State fans said that for years and years. And then guess what? We all got left behind. The Big 12 picked a couple of them, Cincinnati, Central Florida, BYU. They snagged up who they wanted, and they left us all behind. So now you're in a position where you have to try and create something for yourself, and you have to try and create the best possible situation that you can be in. I think you can argue whether a reverse merger at this point should have happened. That's, up for debate. I've explained a million times why it didn't happen. Oregon State and Washington State were never going to want that to happen. And honestly, I think some of the departing schools were probably not exactly, they weren't cringing or flinching at the possibility of dropping, some of those schools who maybe don't bring as much to the table. Ironically, that's how the Mountain West began in the first place. The OG WAC got way too big. They did the super conference before any of these other leagues did. And guess what? Everybody hated it, just like everybody hates what's happening in these 18 teams right now. It becomes complicated. Teams don't end up playing the rivals that they want to play on a regular basis. It's hard to evaluate things in an 18-game league or in an 18-team league because, certain teams get really tough draws and others don't. There's not enough money to be spread around. There are all these flaws. We've gone through this before, yet history repeats itself. all of that being aside, if you are CSU, if you are Boise State, if you are San Diego State, you have to try and put yourself in the best possible position, basically continue to tread water until you can ultimately swim. And you have a chance here to create something new, to potentially be a landing spot for schools and down the line. That's one of the things that I think people fail to mention in all this when they talk about it being, oh, it's the Mountain West 2.0. Well, first of all, it's not, because you would want the top brands. But second of all, this is never ending. And who knows what's going to happen with the ACC? Who knows what's going to happen with the Big 12? There is a very realistic world, and where the Arizona schools or Cal or whoever it may be end up back in the Pac-12, 10 years from now. Who knows? But you have an opportunity here to create something that's relevant, to make more money than you were making, and to make yourself as a part of the national conversation as you can realistically hope to be, given the circumstances. You were dealt a bad hand. This is all of these schools trying to be bold, trying to invest in themselves and make the best of a bad situation. It is a bad situation for all of these schools, and that's why they have to try something. And that's why I get so annoyed at the disingenuous commentary when people start being snarky with the Mountain West 2.0 or, whatever, nobody's going to care about it. Well, that's not true. I mean, if people watch 6-6 bowl games, if you can get 3 million people to tune into these meaningless exhibition games, you're telling me that people wouldn't tune into, a ranked San Diego State, Boise State matchup? There wouldn't be betting interest there. The league is going to have a draw. The important thing, though, is they've got to back it up with substance. They've got to be able to compete and get to the playoff and prove that there is a gap, between them and the Mountain West, obviously, but more the American, especially if you aren't able to, pull off Memphis or Tulane or some of those other schools. We'll see what happens with all that down the line. Maybe they do ultimately jump. But I think what's really interesting about the Pac-12 going into all of this is just kind of how wide open all of this feels. I don't know if there's any program in the conference that feels 100% sure of who they are at the moment. I think there are some schools that are trending more in the right direction than others. I think there are some schools that are just giant question marks. But I think what makes all of this fun and especially intriguing, if you are, say, CSU, San Diego State, even Utah State, is the fact that Oregon State and Washington State are Oregon State and Washington State are not who they used to be. Boise State, that brand isn't what it once was. I think that if you are any of these schools, you can talk yourself into, if things go right, we have a realistic path to, competing for a conference title and potentially early. Boise, I know they've won 3 straight league titles. They've dominated the Mountain West. They're still the face of the league, all of that. They're also in this weird spot where it's like, yeah, we beat Mountain West teams, but we don't beat them as dramatically as we should. We no longer have the same competitiveness against P4 teams. I think Maddox Madsen kind of proved to be the pumpkin that I said he was in the preseason when everyone was crowning him and he was, preseason player of the year. I think that it was a justifiable pick in preseason offensive player of the year, just based on the fact that he was one of the more established quarterbacks coming off of a league title. But we talked about him having a relatively low ceiling, like him not being Kellen Moore, him not being even Brett Rippon. Boise isn't what they used to be. And that's what's so frustrating if you're CSU, even if you're San Diego State this year. Like, Boise was very beatable, and we still let them win the league. It's a weird spot. I think there's more reflection and internal review happening with that program than you would anticipate, given the fact that Spencer Danielson's 24-8 in 32 career games and has won 3 straight league titles going back to when he took over as the interim a couple years ago. They probably on paper would be the betting favorite to be the team that carries the banner for the Pac-12 2.0, just based on the fact that they have always won. Obviously, they have the best winning percentage in all of college football, but they aren't what they used to be. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens if, say, next year they look kind of human. How much pressure ends up on Spencer Danielson. He's been very loyal to them, but I could see it being a scenario where you look back and he missed his window. like should have taken a P4 job when it was potentially on the table. We'll see. Fresno and Washington State, you have all this ego, or Washington State and Oregon State, excuse me, you have all this ego because you were a part of the OG Pac-12. You feel like you have a level of status that the rest of the conference doesn't. In reality, you were propped up by geography for a long time. And I say that with all due respect. And I am very excited for the future Pac-12, but it's the same argument I've made with the Iowa States and Kansas States of the world. Congrats. Those teams got carried by Nebraska for years and years, and then Oklahoma and Texas, but you weren't them. You weren't USC. You weren't Oregon. You were certainly a step above, programs like CSU in terms of national relevancy, but there's going to be a level of pretentiousness with those fan bases that frankly does not match the current reality. And it's a very similar argument to what I've said about Boise State, but Boise State's in a far more stable position than either of those teams are. Washington State's going to have their third coach in 3 years. They're like fourth in 6 years or something crazy like that. Oregon State, I think they made a good hire in Jamarcus Shepard, but it is a gamble. You're going with the first-time head coach in a region that he doesn't have a ton of coaching experience in. And in that sense, I think that Kirby Moore, I think I like a little bit better as a fit at Washington State, and that's not a slight at Shepard or anything like that. It's just a gamble. He's a big gamble coming from the big program. It feels like you're going for a Bobo type hire, but he has far less of a resume and track record than Bobo did at this point. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe it works out. Maybe it doesn't. My point is it's always a gamble with the first year coach, and those programs, they might feel like they are above, CSU and Boise and Utah State, but competitively, I think they're all going to be right there in the same vein. So it's just really interesting. Utah State, with Bronco Mendenhall, he's a great coach who's had a lot of success at BYU and Virginia, and he comes in immediately, is able to win at Utah State, even despite all the turnover. I could see them quietly being one of the sleepers to be one of the more consistent teams, just like they have been, in the Mountain West for the last decade. Texas State, who knows? I'm a little skeptical of them, but you've got that Texas footprint. They recruit well. Kine is a good coach, or Kenny, maybe that's how you pronounce it. We'll see. Entz, I think, is a solid hire. He makes sense, but 1 year in, probably don't have enough to draw a realistic, accurate conclusion. But I think they left some meat on the table, and it's first-year program, so I'm not going to judge him too hard. But I think if you're CSU, you feel pretty good. Yes, you had a letdown season, as did Texas State, but now you feel like you got the shiny new coach. If we were power ranking the coaches, which I have put together just kind of a rough power ranking of the Pac-12 coaches going into 2026, I would put Jamarcus Shepard at 8, Oregon State. I would put Kirby Moore at 7, just because we've never seen them be head coaches. It's tough to argue that, but it speaks to what I'm kind of talking about here, is that Oregon State and Washington State aren't the programs they once were. Boise has some reflection to do. Fresno is usually relatively competitive, as is Utah State, but those don't feel like the programs that are giants you can't get over. They don't have the same cachet that Boise does, or even Oregon State and Washington State. Texas State has been on the rise, but if you're CSU, you should feel pretty good about where you are going into this. So I've got Shepard 8, Moore 7. I've got Matt Entz of Fresno State 6, coming off of a solid year. Kenny, Texas State, 22-16. I've got him at 5. Sean Lewis at 4, but trending closer to the top 3. Bronco Mendenhall, I've got him at 3 right now, a career winning percentage of about 61. Spencer Danielson, I have him at 2. I know he's won 3 straight league titles. I know he's 24-8. He has done what is expected at Boise State. What have UConn and UCLA done historically in the last 15, 20 years? UCLA has better history than UConn, obviously, but what have those schools done in the last 10 to 15 years outside of when Morrow was there? That's what I would say to anybody that tries to poke holes in his resume. I mean, look at what he's done. It's unprecedented, especially at UConn. He's got NFL head coaching experience. I personally believe that Jim Mora is the best coach on paper in the Pac-12 going into 2026. I like Danielson. I think he's a coach on the rise. I think he's done some weird stuff with the quarterback rotation. I think he's leaned into some odd running back choices at times as well this year. Kind of failing to optimize Riley when he very clearly was the best of that bunch. But I really like the spot that CSU is in going into this Pac-12. And I think the future of the Pac-12, although maybe not the immediate home run that we thought it could be, still very much has a realistic path to being a competitive and viable conference. And I think that depending on what type of instability happens, down the line with some of those other leagues, and it's not done. Anybody that thinks this is just over, this is the P4, these are the G6, those boundaries are set. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. There's too much money at stake for it to be done. It's never going to be done. But I like where CSU is at going into this Pac-12, and I think there is realistic and rational reason for optimism. So that's where I'm at. I think they'll be the consistent representative in the playoff, these next couple of years, as long as the format doesn't change drastically. I guess we'll see if it goes to 16 or 24 or whatever it is. I will say, I love the idea of more inclusion in the playoff because these Power 4 schools do everything in their power to limit the access, for schools like CSU and Boise and the group of 6. I do think we're getting to a point where it's missing the point. When 3 and 4 lost teams are whining about missing out on the playoff, that's where I have some hesitancy to expanding, because it's not going to result in more access for, what it should be is the Pac-12, the American champ, they both get in. And instead it means we end up with the 6th best team in the Big Ten, or, these teams that go 8 and 4 and are whining about not being included. Like, how do you have the gall to say you deserve to be a national champion? Because I get it, they're tough leagues, but you went 8 and 4. Shut the fuck up. That's all I've got for today's show. Thank you for tuning in. I have another show for you Friday. We will have some pre-recorded shows for next week throughout the holidays. I'm going to try and take a little bit of time off, spend some time with family. Doesn't happen very much for me in my schedule. But so much love to all you guys for supporting the content. The pod numbers have been awesome. Please subscribe to the newsletter. It's free. The latest in all of the Denver sports world in your inbox every day. Thank you for listening to the DNVR Rams podcast presented by Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off your first order. Much love, y'all. Always proud to be. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.